just training yourself to be like, where's my tongue right now? Is it on the floor of my mouth? Is it on the roof of my mouth? Just always having it gently on the roof of your mouth as much as you're aware of it is huge.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Krista Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together. Today on The Less Stressed Life, I have Kristen Geist, who has been practicing dentistry for 8 years, but during the last 5 years, she's been narrowing her focus to airway, sleep apnea, and adult laser tongue tie release. So a very fun, kind of sort of trendy topic. Several years ago, she was struggling with her own exhaustion, lightheadedness, anxiety, and trouble breathing before she was properly sleep tested and diagnosed with something called upper airway resistance syndrome, which is on the spectrum of sleep apnea, which is so interesting and deceiving, right? Because there's how we think of sleep apnea and how sleep apnea could be. I bet you were shocked. Now
Yes.
she works together with other providers to help those with sleep apnea, tongue ties, and more feel their best. She lives in upstate New York with her husband, son, and 2 adorable rescue pups. And she's just thrilled to spread awareness about things like sleep apnea and tongue ties, that what can be caused in adults and what signs you should look for if you should be screened. So what a wonderful topic. Honestly, this is serendipitous because I meant to do maybe a few episodes related to this, and then you just fell into my life. How wonderful. And
Perfect.
very recently, your sister, who is amazing, Jen Johansson, was here talking about something absolutely completely different, yet also.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
So
Yes.
I have a whole family here. We met
Yeah.
all in the same place in an online group for health professionals. So I'm just thrilled you're here to talk about your story and what you're doing now, Kristen.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah. Shout out to the Unconventional Collaborative for connecting us.
Yeah,
I
for
love
sure.
love it. So sure, I'll tell you a little bit about my journey and how I
Please.
got here. So I still do some of the normal dentistry things, but a lot of how I got into this was because of my own journey with just feeling like junk a lot of the time, which I feel like is how a lot of us start to go down these rabbit holes, right?
Best way to help others is to help yourself first.
Yes, exactly. When I tell you I was short of breath, I felt exhausted. I could walk from like where I was seeing my patient to the front desk and be like, was like, something was very wrong with me. And I was lightheaded and the anxiety was just through the roof. And so naturally went to,
was serious.
Oh, it was a problem. Went to lots of doctors, no answers. Oh, your blood work's normal. You look normal. You have a stressful job. Everything's coming back normal. So maybe you just need to work on your stress, that kind of thing. And I was like, I don't know. Yes, could anxiety be part of it? But there's something like physiologically just off here. And I just need help.
And first, was the anxiety there or was it created by the breathing issues? That was the conversation I was having with.
They feed off of each other. They feed off of each
What's
other
the chicken or the egg?
so much. Exactly. So I went to urgent care and they're taking my pulse ox and they're like, oh, your oxygen is like really low. I think you're having a pulmonary embolism. And they sent me to the hospital and chest scans, all the things. And they're like, I don't know. You look pretty healthy. And
this was so frustrating for you, a doctor.
And so this like in the middle of the night, in the middle of a week, during a work week. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I still don't know what's wrong with me.
Maybe I'll die tonight.
That's
like where your brain's going.
Literally, like I felt so lost. And I happened to go to a dental sleep medicine course, literally purely coincidence. It happened to be down south where my sister lives. And I wanted to coordinate a visit with her. So I'm like, cool, that sounds interesting. I don't know anything about it. Let's go. And part of the course was they were like, we're taking volunteers to take these sleep tests, like the normal sleepers and then the people who think they might have sleep apnea. And I'm like, I sleep great. I don't snore or anything, but I would love to learn. Like, I'll volunteer. So I took a test. And the next morning when they printed out the results, they're like, so we're not your doctor. We're not diagnosing you with anything, but you're not breathing. And this could be problematic. You might want to see someone about this. And so I was like, what? Like I was at the same moment, like so mad, but so grateful at the same time because I was like, okay, could this be like a light bulb? Is this a thing that I should look into?
Was
But
this
also
after the middle of the night emergency room visit?
yeah.
How much
Oh
later?
yeah. I had been through all of that.
Okay.
And I'm like,
How past
so,
that were you?
oh gosh, it was like months, maybe even like a year. Like it
Oh,
was a
no.
long
Your
time.
sleep was horrific.
It was horrific.
And it really decays your entire health.
Everything. Oh my gosh. From your digestion to your emotional
Totally.
regulation. I could cry at literally anything,
Mhm.
like at any given moment because of how dysregulated I was.
Mhm.
But anyway, so I printed out the test, went to a pulmonologist and was like, help. What does this mean? And he went through the whole test with me and was like, to be honest with you, I'm seeing this more and more. I'm calling it the young, fit female syndrome,
Oh, wow.
which is upper airway resistance syndrome. It's people who don't present as the typical sleep apnea person, but there's something with your airway, there's something in the resistance in there that's causing this fragmentation of your sleep, which basically throws a lot of things off and you just feel terrible. And I was like, oh my gosh. It was amazing to finally have an answer. But then I was like, okay, now what? And I see that you're a dentist. I would love for you to learn about this so we can help more people together.
How
And
did you find this guy?
just by chance, I needed a pulmonologist.
You got lucky.
Yeah, I got really lucky. But honestly, at that time, I was too tired and overwhelmed to even
Mhm.
consider it. I was like, I just need help. It wasn't until quite a bit later that I like looked into how to actually help people with this. Once I was like, oh my God, life is so good when you can breathe and sleep. Oh my gosh, what have I missed out on for years? So that's basically how it went. I realized I had basically a form of sleep apnea, started to feel better and realized, hey, I cannot be the only one, especially as a woman who doesn't fit the mold. And talking to people, I was like, there's a lot of us that this is going on.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about how sleep apnea usually looks and how common
Sure.
it is. And then let's talk about what it looks like when we're calling it upper airway resistance. I was making some notes because this is
Yeah.
one of my favorite things is like bringing to light things that people don't realize would be an issue, right? And so
Yeah.
often when we look at things by the cover of the book, I have a lot of examples of this, but we'll just stick to yours. Sleep apnea was not at the top of your list to expect.
No.
Were you using any kind of sleep tracker? Because I asked because sometimes like on an Aura ring, it will show that you're waking up several times in the night.
I think I had an Apple Watch at the time, but I honestly didn't even process that sleep was part of it.
Mm.
I thought the fatigue, I thought it was something else, like some
Did you feel
deficiency.
like a restless sleeper?
No, that's the thing. I didn't really realize
Oh,
that my brain was
fascinating.
active or waking up all night long. A lot of us with these breathing issues, you don't recall that you're waking up a lot. So I actually thought my sleep was fine.
Oh, wow.
I knew my breathing was off.
Yeah.
Which I never
Shortness of breath.
connected everything. So I guess I'll go over just like a couple of like terms here, just so everything makes sense. So with sleep apnea, basically an apnea means you stop breathing, right? So I always use the analogy of a faucet. So if you turn a faucet on, the water's running through full throttle, that's good, healthy breathing. You turn the faucet off, that's apnea. Now in the middle, if you turn it a little bit, there's little drips coming through, that's called a hypopnea. So you're like shallow breathing or like you're breathing through a straw. That's what I was doing all night long. And those little shallow breathing episodes keeps you in this like surface level sleep all night. And your brain is what's going on, like in that sympathetic fight or flight mode all night long. So that's where the anxiety piece also comes in because you're never getting into that parasympathetic kind of mode. But anyway, so typically the older model of sleep apnea was it's more common in men. It's only if you're of a bigger body size or a bigger neck. That's literally like the stop bang protocol. It's really geared towards men and bigger men, but it misses a huge category of people, especially women, because a lot of it has to do with just your anatomy or your airway. So I would say about 50% of people snore, somewhere around there, and about a quarter of people have some sort of sleep apnea. So it's massively, and I think we all have this idea that the only treatment is CPAP, and that's not really the case anymore. There's so much out there. But this is all new. Sleep apnea wasn't even really named until like the 60s. CPAP's only been around since the 80s. This is all new and changing constantly.
I would guess that there's a lot of underdiagnosed sleep apnea. And then this is a whole different kind of level because of how we're assessing, right? I'm thinking about this big picture. I think about, let me use this silly analogy. It's just the first thing that's coming to mind. When I think about diabetes, for example, like we do have some pretty simple blood work where it will show up in a few different markers that we can look at or get an indication and some clear symptoms. I feel like with sleep apnea, it would be, I think the diagnosis is not, I don't feel like it's complicated, but it doesn't even seem particularly accessible to people all the time, because my interpretation is that it's a sleep study or a sleep test, and that's not always accessible to everyone. Would you agree?
I agree.
Is there any back end markers that can give us like an indication that it's there?
So I would say in the typical presenting person, it's the snoring, it's the gasping in the night. You wake up all the time to pee, or you just feel tired all the time. It's people with high blood pressure. But in women, especially the UARS population, it doesn't present the same way. It's the anxiety, it's the lightheadedness, it's tooth clenching and grinding. It's things that, unfortunately, if the awareness isn't there and nobody's there to put the pieces together, you're not ever getting that test.
And the test should be a sleep study, right? That's it. That's the only option.
I would say a sleep study is a great place to start. Yeah.
I think I saw that there was, I'm just literally shooting from the hip. Sorry, Kristen.
I love it.
Feel like I saw recently advertised to me on Facebook, obviously. Hopefully I'm talking loud enough to my phone, it'll show up again, that there was like a home sleep study test or a home sleep apnea test. Have you seen that?
Yes. So there are actually a bunch of them out there. Like the one that I work with a lot is called Sleep with 3 I's, SLIP. And they're amazing. The doctor who created it is just wonderful. And he does a lot of hands-on, like he does the consult, he mails you a sleep test to your home, and he does the follow-up. So he can prescribe an oral appliance or a CPAP or whatever it is that you need right there. A lot of the at-home sleep test companies where I've seen them fall short is there isn't a follow-up. They just send you the results and then there's nobody there to guide you.
Yeah.
And I've had a hard time with that because then people come to me like,
I want to just put a flag there that this is a common, I like to just entertain humanity sometimes. And I will say that humanity does believe that a test will be the answer for them.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's exactly wrong, but it feels really invalidating when you go from place to place and you have a test that are like, oh, everything is fine. And or if you want to order a test and you cannot interpret it or do not know what to do with it, because sometimes tests are not straightforward. Sometimes there is some gray area. Most tests are designed so there isn't gray area, but there is.
That's so valid. And honestly, with like people like me, a home sleep test is great, but it's not always the end all be all.
What if you did a home sleep test and it was negative? You would have just moved on.
That's what's happening to like tons of people. And then they reach out to me because they're like, but I still have all the symptoms. Something's wrong. Number one, home sleep tests massively underestimate scores, but it's much more accessible. It's a lot cheaper to do it that way. And it's a great starting point to just see. And there's a lot of issues with the translation, like you said. Like I've had so many people who's the doctor just wrote on it, negative for sleep apnea. And I'm like, but there's like a lot of other details in here that are showing us that they woke up a million times from something. So sometimes it's a matter of having the right person to help you understand it too, which is just hard.
It is hard. And luckily for us, you went through some hard stuff too. I think when you go through something, you have a different type of empathy, right? There's something you can understand when you've gone through something, whether it's good or not that you've had this experience. Here we all are learning from you.
Here we are.
Thank you. Let me ask you about just like major ballpark cost of the sleep or that home sleep apnea test. Is this like $1,000 or $500 or $2,000?
A lot of it's honestly covered by health insurance, which is amazing. Like even the one that I do right now through sleep, most of my people doing it get it covered, which is awesome.
That is,
I would say worst case, it's maybe a few $100s. These are not, in lab studies are much more expensive to physically do and to get, and it's just a lot more complicated. So yeah, unfortunately, like it's a pretty easy, it's non-invasive test to do. So if we can just get this out there to more people so they can at least do that, then it's helpful.
Okay. I don't think we've fully finished your story.
Yes.
I think it's going to lend us to what happened. So you go to this pulmonologist. He happens to be amazing. This is a lovely privilege sometimes of being in the coastal areas, I feel like, as a woman from the Midwest, where things hit us late. Not saying we don't have amazing doctors, just sometimes you get someone really progressive, a little ahead of their time, which Feels like maybe you did. I'm not sure, but hopefully. So you got this pulmonologist. He's letting you know, hey, you've got this thing I'm seeing a lot. Cool. Amazing for him. And then what happened?
So to be honest with you, as much as he helped me get to that point, after that,
Good luck.
yes, I hate to say it because he's amazing, but there is an oral
You may not
appliance
have had the tools yet, you know?
He didn't. Yeah. And so
We've
I
all
did
been
have
there.
to do a lot of learning myself to figure out, okay, how do I breathe better? What does that even mean? So at the beginning, it was a lot of like inhalers and different things to try and like.
So he wasn't even really able to tell you about like tongue tie and
Oh, none of this. No.
It's so funny, right? That you just happen to be in the right profession to learn these things, right? It's just not that it's automatic.
I'm super great. He was like, you can make yourself an oral appliance to keep your airway open while you sleep. It can't hurt to try that. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, what? And so I did it. It's basically like a mouth guard that some people wear for sleep apnea.
Yeah.
It keeps your airway open while you're sleeping. And the next morning when I woke up, I was like, are you kidding me? I didn't wake up at all. And I was like, is this what it feels like to sleep normally? Does everybody have this? Or I just thought it was normal to wake up feeling like crap. So as soon as I did that, I was like, okay, there's something here. And then just went down all the rabbit holes from there to keep working on my breathing and sleep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some of those rabbit holes. What happened? You basically had to like self-treat, it sounds. But you're into laser tongue ties and things. And I don't think that's really popped up yet in our conversation. So how did that play into your story, if at all?
So actually, it wasn't in my own mouth. It was in the mouths of all the people that I was seeing because I started to get all these sleep apnea people who needed oral appliances because of, yes.
It's funny what happens.
Word of mouth.
It's funny what happens when your eyes become open to an issue. You're like,
yes.
Oh my gosh, this is actually everyone's problem.
I know. And then, oh, my husband snores. Oh, can I send him to you? Because he had a sleep test, but he can't tolerate a CPAP. And so I just started to get everyone who couldn't tolerate a CPAP. And then I start to look in their mouths and I'm like, oh my God, every other person has a severe tongue tie. What's going on?
And did you know anything about tongue ties before this?
Not really. To be honest, it sounds so weird. But with our training, it's not really in there.
Oh, yeah. I'm not shocked or anything. I'm honestly just so thankful to meet. In the last month, I've met more than one dentist that focuses on this. And I
love it.
I feel like fireworks.
I love it. It's a small little world.
Right. I know.
Yes. So once I was in the breathing world and sleep and airway, I just started to notice it. And then I'm like, now I got to learn about this because everybody that I happen to see with this issue has this. Like, what chicken or the egg? What do I do? I'll back it up to just like a nasal breathing, mouth breathing thing real quick because that's where this all ties in. I know you just had a lot of conversations with other people about
problem.
breathing.
Doesn't mean the person listening to this, listen to that episode.
But
carry on.
So in order to breathe through your nose, two things must be true. You've got to obviously have a clear nasal passage, but also your tongue has to be able to get up to the roof of your mouth and make contact with the palate. That's how you breathe well through your nose. So right now, if you put your tongue up gently on the roof of your mouth, you're going to breathe through your nose, right? For people who it's tied down to the floor of your mouth, you're going to habitually breathe through your mouth because it's just easier. It's a lot of effort for your body to get your tongue up to the roof of your mouth where it should be. That's the key piece, is that the tongue being up or down is like the on-off switch for if you can mouth breathe or if you're nasal breathe.
Explained like that. And it's so simple.
So simple.
Sometimes someone says something in one sentence. I'm like, that's the best way to explain that. That never made sense to me.
Oh, so good. But it's literally with your background, mouth breathing, there's not even a debate anymore. We know there's so many issues that go along with it. So if it's that much harder for your body to breathe through your nose, it's putting so much stress on so many systems. So literally just that one piece of just your tongue being able to have the proper posture was causing people to breathe poorly. So I started to look into, okay, how do I help these people? And Dr. Zaghi at the Breathe Institute has amazing resources. Zaghi, Zaghi, and he's doing a lot of research too to have the evidence there for how these things work and how they help people. So that's been amazing. So I did a lot of courses through him. And actually, he's a great resource. The Breathe Institute website has ambassadors and affiliates that have gone through his trainings to find somebody in your area. But yeah, so that's basically the key piece, is that tongue position really changes how you breathe and how you swallow. So for adults, because I don't really treat kids, but I treat adults. So some of the key things to tell, do you have a tongue tie or not? So we'll do this together too. So say you got food stuck behind your top back molar. Can you reach it with your tongue?
Oh,
okay, good. A lot of people with a tongue tie can't. They can't clean the food off their teeth.
This before.
Yeah. So you start to see people as a dentist, and I'm like, why do all of your top molars have root canals and crowns, and you've had fillings, and oh my God, you can't clean it off with your tongue? What?
Yeah.
No.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah,
like you just think you're anatomically fine.
Well, then
understandably.
you ask somebody and they're like, oh, I would have to shove my finger in there. And I'm like, oh, you shouldn't have to do that. Essentially, your tongue should be able to move freely to speak, swallow, to do basic functions. And if it's tied down to the floor of your mouth, it's bringing your jaw with it everywhere it goes. So you're going to have sore TMJ muscles and things like that. You're going to have issues like that. So there's a lot of things that we see in adults with tongue ties. Typically, it's the clenching, grinding, jaw pain, constant cavities because they can't clean their teeth off well, mouth breathing, and you like choke on water a lot because you can't swallow well. So there's a lot of things like that with adults who have tongue ties.
How about history of braces because of crooked malaligned teeth? I would guess because if your tongue's not on the roof of your mouth, that's honestly creating the shape of your face and the shape of your having room for your teeth, right?
So there's so much there. I don't know if you read the book Breath by James Nestor, but that
it's in that cabinet there.
Add it to your pile.
You added the pile. Yes. Books that
it's such a good listen or read. I love audiobooks for anyone, not just professionals, for anyone. He goes through like ancient skulls, how like their teeth were all straight and they never had dental problems, and then how everything's getting crunched in and smaller over time with like less chewing of food, more pureed baby food, less breastfeeding. There's like a lot of things that have just made our anatomy different over time. So if somebody has a narrower arch and a tongue issue, they've got so many things working against them there.
Yeah, unexpected as well. I do want to know, like, why are we having these tongues that are, I know you just gave some examples, but I do want to understand, like, why do we have these tongues that are tied down?
So everybody has like an attachment there. Some people just have more tension there than others. So there's a really cool dissection. If you Google like the deep frontal line of fascia, it literally shows like tongue to toes, like how it's connected in the body. Who knew? Everything's connected in your body.
My friend had a tongue release and she said she could never touch her toes in her entire life. And she had the release and went home and touched her toes.
It's insane.
It's
insane. Like when I release a tongue, I'm always like, if there's a functional issue that we're resolving, I'm releasing your tongue to get more tongue mobility so you can do whatever it is that we need to do. I'm not going to promise you it's going to change your world. But the next day, the number of people who are like, my jaw pain is gone. Like, I don't get headaches anymore. Feels great. Like the things that people come back saying after, I'm like, I can't always explain it, but I'm happy for you.
Yeah. Okay. There was an audio blip and it said, my jaw pain is gone, no headaches. And what else did you say?
Oh, it's just random stuff that will go away. It'll be like, I was in PT for something with my foot or my shoulder or whatever, and it'll totally just resolve. I feel like whenever there's tension somewhere in our body, you're going to compensate.
Yeah.
So
fascinating. So fascinating. I know we're not going to talk about kids, but I wanted to just offer the symptoms that you shared with me in advance that could be showing up in kids if they are having this problem. Because there's a lot of savvy women that listen to this that happen to be parents and aunts, etc. So
yes,
you said bedwetting, ADHD.
That's a big one.
Chronic infections.
Yeah, chronic ear infections is a big one, which the more I learn this, the more I see it like in my friends' kids, and the more like once we get down this, they're like, they're gone.
You cannot unsee these things, right? This is really the problem. It's like, I remember, this reminds me of when I first learned about estrogen detox and chin acne. Then I was like, bet this woman has fertility problems.
Oh,
like
right.
Walking through life. I've let that one go. Got a lot of other ones like that. I'm like, just close your eyes. Just close your eyes. No, it's not a bad thing. It's tricky. The humanity here is if your friends love you, they're so excited. And at the same time, it's like sometimes people are like, I do not care. Not that your friends are like this, right? But it's you would love to help
talking
people.
To me about tongue tie. Okay, cool.
Last week when I was interviewing Patrick McEwen and we were talking about children, I just felt so inspired in that moment. So I do breathwork facilitation for my clients. It is not functional breathwork. It's different than airway type or that type of breath stuff. It's like breathwork journeys on purpose. That's what we do with clients for other nervous system reset, lymphatic pumping, etc. lots of physiological opportunities with breathing, as you're aware. It makes everything better. And I felt so inspired by that conversation. I was like, I wonder if my school would let me volunteer to come in and talk to kids about mouth breathing. And I'm thinking, like, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm mostly, I listen to you
You're
talk
going to
about,
be like at the PTA meeting. Hey, parents, look at your kids.
We've really got to breathe through our nose, guy.
You can't. I'll be at the playground with my son and I'm like, oh, that kid, he's probably like still wetting his bed at 8 because he's mouth breathing. And it's the reality. But so I know I got a little sidetracked, but yes,
sorry,
ADHD.
Sidetrack us.
No, I love it. So ADHD tendencies, yes. Sleep deprived kids show up with a lot of the same tendencies. So any kid who is diagnosed with ADHD, it's always a good idea to have an airway screening, sleep screening. Best case scenario, that can be treated and then they're not on meds for their whole life. Worst case scenario, they still go on the meds. It's super conservative, non-invasive thing to do. Chronic ear infections, because if you can't get that tongue up, you can't swallow properly. When you swallow and you hear that kind of like crunch noise, that's clearing your eustachian tubes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not doing that all day long, you're going to be more prone to ear infections. Food aversions is super common in young kids because different textures are hard for them to chew and swallow if their tongue is tied down. So that's a big one. Tired kids, they've got the dark circles under their eyes and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of different things to look for there with kids. But the amazing part of kids is we can affect them while they're growing and developing, not even just with the tongue, but like with expanding the palate and giving them room to breathe and room to grow. And then they don't turn into an adult like me with airway issues, because any kid who's clenching, grinding their teeth in the night, they probably have airway issues. That was me.
And we're thinking about this from a very structural perspective, which makes perfect sense for the context of our conversation. Yeah. And I bet there is a little bit of a chicken and an egg situation, because I think one of the reasons a person would mouth breathe because they already have congestion as well. So what came first? And so there is obviously some other, what I would call nutrition chemical things or imbalances, we'll just call them microbiome imbalances that could aid in clearing up sinus things as well. So you can breathe through the nose. That's the conversation. I do think that there is a lot of fear about sleeping with your mouth closed and breathing through your nose. And from our conversation last week, Patrick says there's nothing in your mouth that helps you breathe. Like your nose is for breathing. Right? Yes. And so it's so interesting to think about. And we talked about on that episode, many of the things that people say that come up, they're like, there's just generally fear around that. And I'm like, quite often you can breathe through your nose, even if it's a little congested, I do find.
Yeah. But I would say, like you were saying with kids, the congestion. So the reason kids are mouth breathers is not always because of their tongue. A lot of times it is the congestion, allergies, mold, something environmental going on that's causing their, so it's, the tongue is just one piece of the puzzle. But yeah, absolutely. The nasal congestion is a big piece of it. So once we can get that figured out too, that helps a lot.
And just small amounts of mold exposure can be pretty detrimental.
Oh my gosh.
Clean your vents, guys. Get your kids a air purifier in their room. If you don't have one, if they have nasal congestion, that's all I'm going to say there, because that's one of those areas I cannot unsee anymore.
Oh, once I did those changes to my home, my breathing changed like overnight. We ripped up all the carpets. We treated our basement for mold, and I was like literally overnight.
It's so common. If I would say 50% of people are dealing with some level, mild to moderate. And that's the thing, is some people just have this wall to that idea, and you don't have to see it before it's there. Your symptoms will tell you, and sinus congestion's a really dead ringer for a chronic sinus congestion. So I would say that's there at least 50% of the time with clients, more for me. So one of those areas I cannot unsee.
Yep.
Okay. So we talked about what you were dealing with. We talked about this presentation of anxiety, lightheadedness, teeth clenching and grinding, which is an atypical, that's not your old school sleep apnea. It's the upper airway
resistance
syndrome. Thank you. Or young fit females.
Yeah. Literally. It's like, tends to be women like your body type with a long neck. And I'm like, okay.
Interesting. Okay. So you did not need a release. You accidentally learned about that and started doing that in your practice. Did we clearly talk about what you did, a mouth appliance, and that was your saving grace? Aside from the environmental changes.
All the home stuff. Yes. Lots of home changes and just being aware of what could be causing any congestion, purifiers, vents, cleaning, all that stuff that you said. Oral appliance. I do wear a nasal dilator every night to sleep. I wear a mute dilator. There's a lot of different options out there.
I mean, Is this like a piece of tape or is it like,
It does.
what Alex Hormozy wears on the internet all day?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It does that, but it goes on the inside. So for me, there's tons of options out there. There's intake, there's breathe right. They're all good. They all open up your airway. I just like really like skincare. So I don't like things that like stick to my nose and make my skin irritated. So it just goes on the inside and opens from the inside. So it's called MUTE. I just get them on Amazon. But that's made a big difference for me. I really like sleeping with that. It's like really easy and cheap. I did have to do inhalers for a little bit, but I don't anymore. And then the other piece is
Why do you think you had to do
myofunctional.
inhalers for a bit?
I was having these spasms in my airway, probably just from everything reaching a peak. But that was more of a rescue inhaler situation just to be able to function. But once I got everything else,
How
like
long did you need that?
several months.
Okay. Just curious because sometimes humans run into roadblocks and they're like, oh, I think I have this wrong. And so it's just nice to hear your experience and story.
Because
and
they were
not
like,
an aversion to that.
I think you have asthma. And I'm like, I've always hated running. Is that why I've hated running? Because I feel like I can't breathe.
I have another question. How long did you have these issues that were somewhat debilitating? Do you think?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. It was months.
Months.
It was many months.
I'm just super curious because you did some home changes and that was a really big deal. How long had you already lived in the house you're in now for a very long time before that started?
We had been here for a couple of years. Yeah.
Okay. So you
So
were there
it
for a couple
wasn't-
years and then at least a year you had these issues, right?
Yeah.
So there may have been a little bit of a chicken or the egg, or sometimes something will happen if you are exposed to something in your air. Unfortunately, it's
Yes.
invisible. Is that you start to breathe more shallowly.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And you were congested as well, is the way it sounds?
Yeah. And we did have,
curious.
like I said, basement mold treatment. We did have carpets upstairs that had been here for who knows how long. That stuff just holds.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there could have
Exciting.
definitely been like some of that just built up over those couple of years.
Interesting. Just curious. And I bring this up because a tongue release could be insanely life-changing and someone might be really happy with that. And there are opportunities for a few things to happen, right? A structural intervention, an environmental intervention, right? And then you had some imbalance of stuff to maybe correct also after that exposure. I don't know. I'm just bringing up all the pieces here on purpose because I see some stuff, you see some stuff in your practice. We treat it differently. We somewhat come to some of the same conclusions, which is pretty cool. I think that's a wonderful, beautiful thing that there can be more than one way, but I really want to promote. Everyone loves a quick win, right? So I really want to promote this whole thing.
But I wouldn't say a tongue tie release is like the fix-all solution for things. It's just, like I said, one piece of it. But myofunctional therapy is another thing that I've done that I forgot to mention.
Tell us about that and how you find a myofunctional therapist. To me, I feel that this is novel, new. I'm over here. I have a college-age daughter who's thinking about going into a type of medical school. And after last week's podcast, I was like, will you listen to these podcasts? Because this is like such a hot area. You could be this. So,
I love
Natalie, this is for you. Tell us
That's so funny.
Therapist.
So myofunctional therapy, basically, it has such a long name. And if you go down the details of it, you're like, I'm so confused. But basically, it's like PT for your tongue and the muscles of your airway.
So
it
do
helps
PTs
you
do it or not really?
No. So it's a specialized thing. So a lot of people who get into it started as speech pathologists or hygienists. It's typically one of those two things. And it's people who've been looking in mouths and down airways for years. And then they're like, oh my gosh, there's dysfunction here that we need to work on.
Interesting. I love this. So who trains for this? Is it like a certification you just stack on your current thing? Do you know anything about this?
Yeah. So for example, the one that I see, she is a speech pathologist as well. And this is now her, like she added this on after. So she does both more myo now because there's such a need. So a lot of it's like learning the tongue posture, getting the strength of your tongue, how it should be. Because some people, it's just a posture or a habit, or they've been thumb suckers or pacifier users for years. So not everybody needs a tongue release. Some people just need some exercises to work on.
Oh, so those are red flag issues. If someone needed a pacifier for a long time, it could have negatively affected their tongue or mouth strength and structure. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm learning so much. I don't know.
I'm going to give you another, none of us do, another thing that comes up like every day because people ask me like, why does it matter about a pacifier? Or like, why does the roof of your mouth matter? So the roof of your mouth is like this, like an arch up, like a high vaulted arch. If you use a palate or a pacifier, the palate, the roof of your mouth is the floor of your nose, right? It's the same thing. So if the roof of your mouth is flat and broad, you have a lot of breathing space for your nose. If the roof of your mouth is like this, arched up, that takes up a lot of space. And now you are missing out on a lot of breathing space. So you're just putting yourself at a much more compromised position there.
But once that's already formed, I feel like that's like that.
So that's why it's important on kids to get them into expansion, because we can do it while they grow. There's some cool things for adults now, like in your 20s, 30s, called MARPE that can expand your
MARPE?
palate. Yeah.
I don't know.
It-
Could you spell that?
MARPE.
Mm.
Yeah. But it's for adults who have a high vaulted palate. And there's other things out there too. But that's just with kids, if we can get on that while they're developing, it's huge.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about how myofunctional therapy has been a game changer for you specifically.
Yeah. So it really helps with the respiratory muscles. Like I just feel like I could breathe better. I sleep better. It really just helps put things where they need to be. And
When did you add that in after
That's-
your expansion? Remember when you made your own mouthpiece and solved your problems?
that's how it goes.
funny.
That's how
Look
it
at
goes.
you.
The myofunctional therapy part has been newer for me. So in the past, I used to have to literally send people YouTube videos of here's some tongue exercises you can try. And I was like, please let there be a myofunctional therapist that comes to upstate New York. And then when I found her, I was like, oh, thank you for being here. And so we just didn't have one in person for a long time. And now we do. And so anybody who needs a tongue release needs to do it before to have the best result. And even with babies, like if they have just a tongue release as a baby, but no body work, no OT, PT, no myo, they're not going to have the best result. So I see a lot of parents who are like, I didn't really, and I'm like, just cutting without having some body work isn't always going to be the best solution.
Well, so relevant, right? Let's go ahead and translate that to every single thing in the world. Any surgery, you have no rehab post, and it's kind of this just goes back to that old adage, which is an amazing adage, which is what you do every day is more important than what you do every once in a while or once. So like how you structure it. And you can tell me if you think I'm on the right path with this, but I have convinced myself that I have exercised my tongue enough to get my tongue to stay on the roof of my mouth and my mouth closed most of the time. I think like sometimes I have to bring more consciousness or awareness to it again after life happens or travel or something, right? Because I mouth taped for a long time and then I noticed the difference. And then I realized, I was like, I think I'm getting it done on my own. Now, I say that a little bit like as a comedy, because I also have clients who tell me, I think I sleep with my mouth closed. And I'm like, how would you know that if someone couldn't tell you, right? And I say that joking, right? Because we're just funny humans. We're just very funny humans. I don't know if that's possible, but in my head, it makes sense because once you train for something, I feel like once you do an intervention, I would love to, I'm just going to ask you, I'm not going to give you the answer here because this happens to me all the time. I'm so curious. How long do you think you would do like myofunctional therapy before you would see results typically that kind of hold?
That's a good question. I don't know. And I hate to say it depends.
That's okay. I find a lot of things are 3 weeks is my takeaway, like 2 to 4 weeks to really try something for 2 to 4 weeks before you like give up on it, because I find that you'll see early results often. And I'm going to put that in there, and it may not be true, but I find it's true for a lot of things. Like I'll just ask random people about 2 to 4 weeks. I'm like, that is just continues to be the recurrent theme.
Yeah. Just like you said, it is true that when you start to breathe through your nose better, over time it gets easier. The reverse is true. If you're habitually mouth breathing, your nose will start to like literally close up and it'll be harder. So it is true. And just training yourself to be like, where's my tongue right now? Is it on the floor of my mouth? Is it on the roof of my mouth? Just always having it gently on the roof of your mouth as much as you're aware of it is huge.
Yeah. I love to credit one of my original breathwork coaches who was a physical therapist and went just fully into breath stuff, like functional breath work, like this type. And he said, just walk around with your mouth closed for a day. And that was such like when you wake up and you're like, that's your job for the day. It's so fascinating. So I did that like a few days in a row, and I still have awareness.
Some people do wear tape for a few hours just during work or whatever, just to see. But most people I notice, if you're waking up with a dry mouth or you need to have water by your bed, okay, you're opening your mouth a lot at night.
Yeah. I haven't got my kids into, just the oldest one, into mouth taping, or I told them I'm getting them the type that goes around because I'm
Yeah.
having this conversation with them. Now, I guess we just didn't have this conversation before. So now I'm trying to have this conversation. It's so funny. It's being a parent is such a good experiment. It's let's see how 10-year-olds
see how it
respond
goes.
when I'm like, hey, did you ever think about putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth?
There's like other cultures, like they'll close the baby's mouth, like when the mouth drops open. So I
Like
would
where?
notice myself, I just feel like I've seen it in books and things, like it's just in history. It's a thing. And I would notice myself like with my son too, if he, as a baby, if I'm like, oh my gosh, shut your mouth.
How
Like
old is
pinching
your
as
baby?
well. He's 20 months.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah.
very, very little. Yeah.
Little dude. Yeah.
Mhm.
But
That's so interesting. My husband used to, when we were dating, there was at least 2 times etched in my brain where he was like, why is your mouth open? So I must have had my mouth open more years
yeah.
ago.
And look at you now.
Like, one can shut their mouth. Anyone can
Close your mouth, people.
Yeah, close your mouth, change your life. So funny. This has been delightful. Let's review what we've accomplished so far. Your story has changed everything. I'm really curious about, I know you work with your dad, right? In the dentist office. And
Mhm.
I'm guessing in a dental office. I don't know how, I know you said this has really changed how you're practicing the last 5 years.
Mhm.
So the majority of the time you've been a dentist. So what was that like initially being this change maker in the office? Was this kind of, hey, I'm going to start doing this in the office? So were you doing this kind of in the office, outside of the office, virtually? Tell me what that's like in real life. The reason I ask you this is because really the last 4+ years, I feel that people are so interested in doing something that really matters, right? Doing
Yeah.
some really purpose-driven work. So I'd love to ask people a little bit about their story of how they got into something
Yeah.
that they feel is really purpose-driven.
It's funny because bringing anything new into an office, there's always like a little pushback. Ooh, I
Sure.
don't know. Like we don't have time. What I did was I had, I trained my team on it and I told them my story with it, but I had them test themselves or their spouses or whoever they wanted to.
So smart.
And then once they realized, oh, my husband's snoring is actually like maybe
When you had
making
them
more
test, were you using that like sleep test?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Had them sleep test. And they're like, actually, this is maybe why his blood pressure has been high for years, or maybe this is putting him at higher risk of a heart attack or stroke. We're going to look into this. And then, so having it done on either themselves or their spouses and realizing like, hey, snoring's super common, but it's actually not normal and it's actually not healthy. And teaching people who are literally staring down airways all day, every day, you can't unsee the signs of the huge tonsils, the teeth that are totally worn down from clenching and grinding all night long. So I just started to be like, hey, I'm happy to fix your tooth that's split in half, but this is the 4th one this year. So what's going on here? We got to slow this down and figure out why it's happening and not just keep band-aiding this. So my team got on board pretty quickly because they saw how much I felt better and how much happier I was that they're like, there's something here because, man, she was in rough shape. So I feel like it was a pretty quick buy-in from them. And then once we started helping people and they would come back and be like, I feel like I have my weekends back. I used to have to sleep all weekend. Just the quality of life improvement. So basically we screen everybody. We tell them what we see. We tell them what we recommend. A lot of people don't do anything with it and that's their choice. But it's been pretty cool to see my team become passionate about screening about it too.
That is so
Yeah.
fun. And something
Yeah.
I didn't mention, but I always feel like dietitians and dentists should be best friends because some people don't like dentists. I don't know what's wrong with them, but I love
It's
dentists.
a lot of people.
I know it's a bummer. Maybe that's in my profession too, but I don't get to see those people. They are not going to come to me. So what I think is fascinating is I always think that the mouth is really the window to what's going on in the rest of the body. And I'm sure you absolutely do too.
Yes.
So I feel like everything going on with your mouth microbiome. And now I'm at the beginning of understanding airway. I actually sent my husband to a holistic dentist at least 2 years ago, and then just let him fly on his own. I'm like, oh, I should come back and see. I feel like maybe you didn't follow up through the pieces, dear. I remember she said, you have like an airway of a small child. Something. It was like something ridiculous.
God.
And
Yeah.
anyway, the more you learn, the more you learn. You
just-
don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm just thrilled that you were able to tell us your story, tell us about myofunctional therapy, tell us about finding this, talking about this deep frontal line of fascia, talking to us. I think I could find some people who work with kids, but someone who works with adults, especially in this interesting to have this other answer for anxiety, lightheadedness, teeth clenching, grinding, these things that just do not make sense for people to have, right?
Yeah.
Such a big deal. What do you think? I'm just looking through all my notes that I took and that I received from you, which are a great many. What do you think we missed, Kristen?
So I was just thinking as you went through that list, just from the dental side, one of the biggest things I see that I forgot to mention is the acid erosion on teeth. And if it's not dietary, if it's not the lemon water, it's not the seltzer, it's acid reflux, which is super common. And of course, there's a ton of reasons, but it's actually super common to have acid reflux with airway issues because it creates this vacuum of the acids. From the dental side, just like you said, you can't unsee these things. If you're constantly like, your dentist is telling you, hey, your teeth are like wearing down, you have no enamel, what's going on? And you've went through all the other things, it's worth looking into.
Actually, I'm thinking about this from the perspective of a couple of clients. And something that I see is after a period of chronic stress, all digestion gets sidelined, essentially. Like it's downregulated for other purposes, survival purposes largely. And then longer term, either short or longer term, you'll start to have random things pop up. Acid reflux would be, or some version of it would be very common. Silent reflux, especially, doesn't always feel like reflux, but you're going to have that acid in the mouth, especially at nighttime. And I wonder, this might be something to consider unless like for sure you're like, yes. For me, I feel like there's often chronic triggering events, a prolonged period of stress, like I just mentioned. For you, I wonder, do you see these exacerbations of things? Even in your own case, think about it. It's like you didn't always have severe symptoms. Maybe you always had minor things if you think back. Because as you tell your story, I think back to my life about being told I always had big tonsils. I was like, thanks, doctor. I got big tonsils. So I just wonder about if there's a thing where something will come to a head sometimes where you see a triggering event or something like that.
I think so for sure, because I definitely was obviously prone to these things. As a kid, like I said, I would grind my teeth so bad my parents could hear it from the other room, which we know now is an airway issue usually, but there wasn't that awareness at the time. I made it through life doing okay, but I'm sure like dental school and working and just life and everything, any kind of stressor is going to make things, like you said, come to a head.
Just curious, because that's the question with, for example, anxiety and asthma and all of things. It's like, is the breathing causing it, or is the structure? I don't know. What is the chicken or the egg?
And they both help each other. Once you can treat the anxiety, okay, the breathing can get better. If you can treat the breathing, the anxiety tends to get better. They help each other. So
And we didn't talk about, I don't think you having anxiety very much, but did you see a marked change if you were dealing with anxiety? Do you even have, would you even say, do I even have anxiety?
Oh my gosh, massive, like huge change. I think I was just in this like constant, like heightened alertness kind of state all the time, but I wasn't even aware.
If you're breathing all day short, you're never sending safety signals to your body. So you would be hyper.
And that was my normal. So it took me a while to get to a new normal baseline, but oh my gosh, significant improvement. Yeah.
I think the takeaway is always, man, life can be better if you want it to be. Like if you don't love where you are now, like you got an option.
And there's a lot of people out there to help with sleep and breathing. And it's like such a basic foundational thing that so many people are like, I don't need help with that. But there's a lot of people out there that can help you with it. And
including you. Specifically, where can someone find someone who is an airway educated dentist or a myofascial therapist? You did drop a note earlier that I think it was Breathing Institute.
The Breathe Institute, has a really good
list of practitioners, maybe.
There's also the AADS as a list of dentists. And if you're in an area where you just can't find somebody, just shoot me a message. I usually can find somebody through one of our groups.
And more specifically, Kristen, I think you work virtually with people also. So people could work with you. So where can people find you online?
So I'm at Prana with Dr. Kristen on Instagram. I was doing free discovery calls for a bit, and then it was just pure chaos. And I'm like, woo, I love helping people, but man, I also need my sanity.
Yeah.
So I will do like a few of those. If you say, hey, I listened to the podcast and can you help me? I'll do a few of those free discovery calls. But otherwise, it's kind of one-on-one right now. And then I have some courses and things that I'm working on to help people sleep and breathe better.
Why not?
Yeah.
I love it. I know. I have this love to do those types of calls and to
Yeah,
connect with
it's
people.
so fun.
And
But then I'm like, that was my whole
my
day
cup is
off.
empty. It's always a trial and error for everyone. So thank you
Yes,
so much for coming
exactly.
on today and
Oh, thanks for having
sharing
me.
so much of your story and how you help people with this, and just like this other window of opportunity that people have when they have these symptoms that don't seem like they would go together. So I
Hey,
appreciate you so
thank
much.
you.
These bones, will they just keep breaking?